All right, folks. So first we will discuss, some of the key pointers for the FMS, form that you are going to be submitting later on. Once we're done with this, we'll go with the SP Gen form. So Rishi, can we move to the next slide? So before we even go into what to put in our SOP, let us first understand what is the impact of an SOP. So a lot of you might not be aware, but the interview process for FMS is notoriously, short as compared to other interviews. So on an average, your interview lasts from anywhere between 8 to 10 minutes. Uh, that's on average, right? So your SOP provides the first impression. So before you even walk into the room, the professor who will be sitting there, they would have gone through your SOP and they would have, in some shape or form, formed an opinion about you. So that's the first thing. It's going to, be your first impression. Fortunately, unfortunately. The second thing is the panelist, the interviewers, specifically the professors, they look towards an enthusiasm from the students that are potential candidates for that institution. Apart from that, they also want someone who can be someone who can contribute to the prestige of the batch that they are going to be a part of. So they do want your enthusiasm for the curriculum as well as some experiences that would enrich the peer set. So the diversity factor, you don't want a lot of engineers in your batch. You also want people from other disciplines as well. That's just an example. So you have a unique opportunity in your first impression to lay down some groundwork, which you can then leverage. Your first impression is going to get formed. Is it a favorable one or not? That depends on how you write your SOP. It is also in a way, because again, it all ties back to it being your first impression. It's also part of your initial screening. They want to check what is the clarity to pursue MBA. Now that is something which is the number one issue with a lot of students. Most people, and if you ask that question to yourself, most people don't really know why they are doing an MBA. Or let me rephrase that, they don't know an answer to this question, which is going to be appreciated by the professors of the set college, by the panelists of the set college. So you can make a generic answer, you can use Chat GPT, you have a lot of tools available for you to write the, why you are doing an MBA. But until it is a bit specific, until it looks like you have, uh, really thought this through, it is going to be something that might end up leaving a negative impression, even before you say the first word out of your mind. uh, Lastly, it's a fact check thing. Any claims that you make that MBA from FMS will help me in this, will help me in that, uh, it's not going to be you know it's not going to have any impact if it is not well researched. So you do have to make some statements which shows that you do know what FMS actually includes. All right. So I think we can move to the next page. So what are the focus areas in your SOP? You should think of your life in this sense. Where are you right now? That is your position X. Academically, professionally, what are your achievements? What is it, you know, uh, that constitutes you? That is the position X. Where it is that you want to be? That is your position Y. So you are at X, where you are currently, and you want to get to some position in the short term and obviously in the long term. So you should have some short term plans, goals, and some long term goals. So how do you get from X to Y? What are the gaps between point X and Y? W is the actual answer to that. How will MBA help you in bridging these gaps? And if you are able to mention specifics about that particular college, which can help you solve this gap, you are golden, because then everything that I covered in the previous slide is going to be in your favor, because your answer will look well researched and it will also look that you have something to provide to the institution in return. Yeah, we can move ahead. Yeah. So overall structure of the passage. So before we even start your SOP section, so once you go through the questions, you will realize that SOP section has a very strange word character limit, right? You have 1,000 characters. It changes. Back in my time, it was not this low, uh, but again, it was very comparable to this. So you have very few words to explain everything about you. What are some of the other questions they ask? You have a separate question about your professional experience. You have a separate question about your scholastic achievements. You have a separate question for your extracurricular achievement. So, in a way, this particular 1,000 character passage, it's going to be a summary of all of these things in a way that it cohesively comes together to show that you are someone who is clear on why you want to do this MBA program and what is it that you want to achieve through it. So your overall structure is going to be something like this. You will first start with a strong opening statement that should capture your, the reader's attention. Understand that whomsoever will be reading this will spend less than a minute, right? So it needs to be bang on. It needs to be very specific, and it should capture the attention. You should prefer something which is situational and avoid quotes, right? So a lot of us have this tendency to use fancy quotes at the start or end of a passage, which again seems very generic. So if you can make that quote into something which is more situational, it will really help your cause. Once you have done that, you should briefly introduce yourself. What is your educational background? What is your professional background? Is there something that you have done which you want to point out here? Again, we will go through an example. Again, this needs to be done in a very, very limited space because overall you only have 1,000 characters, which looks something like 130 words, 100 to 130 words. Average length is somewhere around, 5 to 8 characters per word, right? So once you briefly introduce yourself, you should add a personality trait, some intrinsic motivator, which along with your background becomes your long term goal. And you should try to back this long term goal with fact situations that will portray your aspirations. Again, it will probably become more clear when we go through an example. And finally, you should conclude how MBA will help you in this. So if we go into these three, sections that we have made for ourselves, right? So section 1, section 2, section 3. Again, you will not be able to write it like this because you have a strict passage. There's no room to create a line spacer, but in your mind it should be structured like this: your introduction, your personality traits culminating into a long term goal, and how MBA will help you solve that. So your background can include your academic achievements, some relevant coursework, any honors or awards you might have. If you have work experience, you should probably give that more importance. Even though you have a separate section for that, you should probably give that more importance, because it's a well known fact that people with work experience in general have more to contribute to an MBA program than freshers. Again, in general, in averages. If you can mention some specific examples, then that will be really good. Moving on, you should go towards the goal. You should clearly outline your short term and long term career objective. Now, in your entire passage that you will write, this particular section is going to be most important. Your background is fine. They will anyways be able to figure that out by talking to you, but that clarity as to who you want to be will set you up for why you want to do an MBA. So these two together are going to be very, very important. Right? A lot of us have answers for this. Most of us don't really know why you want to do an MBA. What is your goals even, right? So you should clearly outline what is your short-term and long-term career objectives, and you should make them so that your short-term objectives, let's say 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the line, should be in a way that they cohesively bring you towards your long term goal, which is 10, 15 years from now. If you do go, now this is an alternate, strategy. If you do want to highlight that where you are currently and where you want to be, there is a gap, and that gap can only be solved by an MBA. You need to ensure that you mention it in a positive light, not as something you have, it should not be portrayed as a skill issue that, I can't make this jump without MBA, but I want to do it right. So that's why I want to do an MBA. It's a very subtle difference, but a positive connotation on why you are in a situation where there are gaps between your current reality and your aspirations, as against to something negative like I can't do this without an MBA. It's going to be a game changer, because once all is said and done, you will realize that a lot of things can be done without MBA also, but it might be more difficult, the probability might be low, and it might take you more time, which are obviously things that you can't mention, that doing an MBA will fast track my career by 2 years, 3 years. That's not something you can say. So let's move ahead. We'll revisit this. Then you should mention what is the reason for choosing this particular program. You should explain how an MBA will help you achieve these goals, and how this particular MBA program is aligning with your career goals and interest. You should be specific in terms of the examples you take, and you should avoid praising the college too much. Right? So a lot of people fall into this habit that I'm going to, this college is the best in the world, or you make very very grand statements, which even the professors, being realists, they might feel that this is probably too much. Right? So if you can find out any specific information about the college, that would be really helpful in this. At the end, you should make a very strong closing statement that should leave a lasting impression on your reader. And it should probably cover how the institution will benefit from your candidature and vice versa. So, a strong opening statement, a strong conclusion. Between these two slices of bread, you should put the meat, which is your background, followed by the goals that you have, and how this particular program is going to help you from your current background to achieve these goals. That's the formula for an SOP. All of this to be done in 1,000 characters. We can move ahead. Yeah. So before we go and look into an example of SOP, let's also cover some of the other questions as well. The achievements part. So your achievements can be of two nature. They can either be professional or scholastic. If you do have any professional achievements, you should focus on them more than the scholastic ones. Please understand that everything that you do pre, during, and post MBA has a very big recency effect. And because your school, college would have been, a bit some time ago, anything you do professionally might have a bigger impact than, let's say, you were the CBSE board topper. So while objectively your scholastic achievements might be very fancy, maybe your professional ones, by virtue of being more recent, will outweigh them. If you don't have a work experience, then obviously you are only going to talk about your scholastic achievements. Now, within professional achievements, you should prioritize, first of all, what is your career performance, and if there is any recognition that you have got, right? So any fast track promotion that you might have gotten, if you have got any awards, a lot of companies give performance ratings on which your promotion is decided. Sometimes you do get early responsibilities in the hope of making you a promotee very soon. Some companies give you Employee of the Month, quarter sort of awards. You get your sport awards, I think, in your big fours, right? So any of these things that you might have gotten, you should mention at first. After that, you should move towards specifics of your projects initiatives. If you have led any business projects, so there's one thing that you are part of a team, and there's another thing that you are leading the team, or at least you have someone who is working under you, which will show that you had to manage them. You had to manage the work aspect as well as the human aspect of the project. So that is something very which is very highly valued in MBA colleges. So you can mention any key business projects that you might have had. If there is any measurable result, now measurable is the focus word. You should mention any quantifiable data that you can. In fact, any point without some quantifiable data is going to be sort of useless, because they simply would not be able to understand what is written. So numbers speaks louder than words. So you should put numbers which are, better looking. So cost, revenue, process improvement, whatever you can put there. Any, initiative that you might have taken, automation, analytics, innovation, which can improve your efficiency. So then you will, quantify the efficiency, that it improved the efficiency of the team by 25%, right? At last, you should mention any leadership, programs that your company might have, where, you might be mentoring juniors, you might have interns working under you, you might have been given responsibilities for those, any training programs, if you are a leader of your team, or if there is any client facing achievements. All of these things will come under the last bucket, along with any, relevant certifications or, cross functional exposure that you get. So your Six Sigma, it's a very common thing in, consulting and big four companies, right? So that is what you will mention here. Now, you do have a separate question for, work experience. It will follow the same pattern, but it will be much more in detail, because you get 5,000 characters for that question. However, in achievements, you will only mention the top achievements, because for this question also you'll only get 1,000 characters. So you have to split it between professional and scholastic. So you will only mention the top achievements. So you do need that clarity to understand which point is more important than the other one. And more often than not, we, as someone who has achieved these things, are too close to the content to actually, objectively take a call which one is better than the other one. Right? I'll show you that in an example. Then again, we'll move to scholastic. Again, because of, recency effect, college level achievements are a higher priority than your school levels. Within that, any academic achievement, they love any ranks that you might have gotten in the college curriculum, because one of the biggest, issues with undergrads is that people lose focus because of, the effort they put to get there. They sometimes do tend to get lax. So this is something which is a true marker of consistency in your profile, something I'm sure you all are now dealing with, those of you who might have, bad UG scores. Any research case competitions, any exams or certifications, you can mention your CAT score if you've taken it before, GRE, CFA, all of these things. And any leadership, tasks, basically your PORs, etc., you can mention here. So this is your college level. This should be the priority order 1, 2, 3, 4 that you should mention. Again, if you have any school level achievement, which honestly you should try and avoid, you should be able to cover 1,000 characters within professional and college level achievements. But if you are not, then obviously we need to put forward, our best candidature. So we will also make use of school level achievements. In that case, you should first go for scholarships and any recognition that you might have gotten. Then you will go for competitive achievements if you have given any national Olympiads, your NTSC, KVPY, or if it's any, inter-school competition, etc. And finally, your academic performance. So do you see the difference? In college, your academic excellence is a very high priority, while in school, it's not that big of a deal. And that is something I'm sure you all might also, resonate with, that getting scores in schools was much more easier than in college. Getting scores in college was a better, reflection of your consistency, so to speak. Overall, keep achievements quantifiable, and outcome oriented. Use numbers, impact, metrics, etc. Only mention unique things. So some of the things might sound, very similar, right? So you should try and avoid this. For example, I am a both NTSC and KVPY scholar. So instead of making separate points for this, I will mention it in one point only. So that will conserve space and also provide volume to one particular statement, making my entire passage for this particular question look more diverse. Right? So keep it quantifiable, outcome oriented, unique, verifiable, and relevant achievements. You should try to put it in bullet points. Although, as far as the interface goes, you might not be able to do that. That is again not your problem. It's the interface problem. You should obviously try and avoid generic participation that you might have had. And these points that you write, in your mind, these should be bullet points. In the interface, it must go as complete sentences. You should use crisp one-liners, and these should start with action verbs. So some action verb which highlights your impact and then how you achieved it. So this is the order it should follow. This is again one of the number one mistakes a lot of people, who apply for jobs, etc. So whatever we just discussed might have looked, very similar to a CV application, right? And that is true. It has to be somewhere in that format, this particular question. And a lot of people make this mistake. They put the impact at the end and the method to get to that impact in the first. So for example, you got a 10% cost reduction, let's say. So they will say analyzed 500 client sheets to achieve 10% cost reduction, instead of saying achieve 10% cost reduction by analyzing 500 client sheets. So the second one is much more better, because again, due to lack of time, people would be skimming through those points, and they would be focused on the starting more than the ending of the sentence. We can move ahead. So similarly, for extracurricular, there are three buckets that you have. You have sports, you have cultural, and you have social impacts. Again, for sports, any award that you have in this given priority, national, state, district, then college, then school. Obviously, this is a mix of your recency as well as the level itself. If you have captained a team, that is something you can mention. And any cultural activity, any extracurricular activity is generally a multi-year thing, right? You can't be be at a competitive level by just participating for a year. So if you have participated over a course of, let's say, 6 years, which it would be required for you to be able to secure some awards, you should mention it in that particular way, that participated, was part of the team for 6 years, achieved national first prize at national level, and captain the team. That would become your sports sentence. Culturally, again, the same thing. Any awards that you might have at inter college or state level. Again, national, generally, we don't see that much, but if you have, sure, go for it. You can also mention any PORs related to your college fests here. And if you don't have these two things, then you can just mention the representation. If you have awards, obviously you'll mention the award. Otherwise, you can mention that you represented. Again, the same pattern here. You should try and mention that it was a multi-year approach, which shows certain resilience and an inclination to stick with the things that you start with. Right. Finally, your social impact, you will have leadership, social clubs, right? Most of us had NSS in our undergrad colleges. A lot of you might have CSR activities in your work, in your professional career as well. As part of your professional career, you can mention those as well. If you spearheaded something, you should mention that. And again, if not, you can just mention the volunteering part. Overall, you should focus on the impact, leadership, and scale of your involvement here. And keep the descriptions very specific and action driven. Again, the same principle as the last particular achievement slide. Use action words like led, organized, represented, etc. Same thing, impact should be at the first, the actual action should be towards the end, and you should avoid listing passive participation, right? Just the participation thing is not going to cut it. It should show certain initiative and certain consistency. So we can move ahead. So these questions are easy. The achievements part, the extracurricular part, the work experience question, which gets a lot more character, because you would essentially be writing your CV at some point in time. If you prepare for What PI with us, you will see that first thing we focus on is making a very well-rounded CV, because then you can lift and shift a lot of things from there, right? However, the SOP, the 1,000-character SOP, that is going to be a bit tricky. So let's look at this passage. This is something that I had written. This was my initial draft when I just wrote it without any, any research, any, effort from my end. Didn't talk to anyone, didn't hire a mentor, didn't take any outside help. So this is what I had written. The first sentence: I believe the MBA full-time program at FMS is the next logical step in my career. Now, if you look at this, folks, let's try and focus on this slide. We'll anyways have a separate AMA for this. We'll have 10 minutes of AMA for this, right? Now, the first sentence that I have said, there is no introduction here. This is right out of the gate. I am saying that this is the next logical step in my career. I have not mentioned anything about my career here. So there is a lack of context here. This is a bad opening. It will help complement the technical skills I have acquired and will widen my perspective. Again, what technical skills have I acquired? How is it that I am assuming that the panelists should know that? And what is it, which perspective am I talking about? So again, First three sentences vague, a lot of words wasted, a lot of characters wasted, nothing achieved. The program will act as a catalyst for my transformation from a technical person to a managerial role, which requires effective communication, careful planning, and execution. By this point, it is very clear that I don't know anything about MBA program because I am using jargon words, which is something you are expected to do, but not in your application. Because how do I back this statement? I have not given any context about me. I have not even mentioned here what is it that I am, that I am an engineer. Have I mentioned that anywhere till now? No, I have not. So it is a bad passage. Even for an initial draft, it is bad. As a creative artist and a mathematics fanatic, now I have introduced who I am, and that also in a very vague way, because neither of these mentions what specialization I have done. I have a strong aptitude to analyze and interpret situations critically. Again, very unbelievable, something which is very difficult to believe in, because again I have not provided any proofs for anything in the context of this passage itself. I want to further develop these in FMS with perseverance, character, grit, and determination. So a lot of force adjectives that you can see here which are not really tying together. I aspire to enhance my ability to communicate, analyze situations using quantitative and qualitative factors. Which ability to communicate? Which situations am I talking about? What are quantitative and qualitative factors? By now, these five things have pointed out that this is a very, very generic passage that has been written. FMS, with its cutting edge pedagogy, state of art infrastructure, industry orientation, vibrant intellectual atmosphere, will enable me to learn from my peers. What a generic appreciation, right? So all of these things, first of all, as far as infrastructure go, there are, a very, the competition is very, stiff as far as infrastructure goes. So this statement might even be not factually very correct. Industry orientation is all right, but again, which industry is it that I want to enter in? Have I mentioned that so far? So this is a bad passage. This adds nothing. Reading this does not help me or the interviewer in any shape or form. This is a random passage that is there. Sadly, most passages that are written are like this. All right. So let's now look at my final draft. My journey has been shaped by a blend of analytical rigor and creative expression. A very great opening salvo immediately catches your attention because I'm mentioning analytical rigor and creative expression in the same sentence. So within the first sentence, you are getting the hint that this guy has diverse experiences. How so? This part is my background as an electrical engineer from IIT Delhi with key roles like secretary dance club and a national level mathematics awardee. I have already established everything I wanted to. I am an engineering grad from a top college in India. I was responsible. I was a responsible person, trusted by my peers, and I had, extraordinary aptitude for mathematics, which is again proved by national level mathematics award. Right? Everything I wanted to express about me, I have done so here. Notice how I didn't mention my CAT percentile because I had 99.99 in 2018. Right? I could have mentioned that. I didn't mention that. I didn't mention my JE rank because all of those things would not have come together nicely in the passage itself. Those would have looked great, but they probably would not have helped in the passage structure itself. I have had dual exposures, precision in numbers and creativity in execution. All of those things are now back. Precision in numbers because I am a national level mathematics awardee. I am an electrical engineer. And creativity in execution because I was secretary of dance club. That have built the foundation for my managerial aspirations. Overall, a very solid background passage. Now let's move towards the goals part. I aim to begin my career in management consulting to gain a 360-degree understanding of business functions. This is so much, this is so much clear than the previous passage. This is telling that yes, I want to be a consultant immediately after I complete my MBA. Why do I want to do that? Because I want to have a 360-degree understanding of how different businesses function. So whatever good you know about consulting, That is why I want to do that. So this person who is reading this passage knows that this Divyansh knows what actually consulting has. In the long run, I envision transitioning into a CEO's office role. If you guys don't know, generally people who are in the CEO's office role are people who migrate out of consulting. 50% people who go out of consulting end up going in either in-house consulting or in CEO office roles, working closely on transformative initiatives and eventually growing into a CXO position. So if you want to be a CXO of a company, this is actually the best way to achieve that. And I am able to capture everything in a cohesive way. I told you my short term goal, I told you my long term goal. I was able to connect the two with the intermediary CEO's office role. So overall, a lot of clarity is being shown here in this particular part. Now I only need to match my background with this aspiration. The unique student run model at FMS offers a hands-on platform to practice real management in a collaborative environment. Now again, something you might not know about FMS, but it is entirely student run. So a lot of other colleges have most of other colleges in fact have participation of faculties and separate infrastructure teams, etc. We don't have that in FMS. Everything is managed by the FMS student society, to the point that even the purchase of stationery is managed by that society. So it's a big society. I did end up becoming the general secretary for that society eventually. So that is something I showed here in my passage. This is something I want to do because it's going to give me real hands-on practice on how to function, how to run a college, which itself is a very big task, right? The distinguished faculty and the strong alumni network, especially in consulting. So this seals the deal. For me to achieve these things, I do need representation of my alumni network in that, and that is something I have established here. Now I have tied these two passages. I have tied my aspirations with how the college will help me, makes FMS the ideal ecosystem to realize my professional goals while contributing to its dynamic peer learning culture. So everything is achieved in very few lines. I had to take a lot of hard calls here. Between the initial and final draft, there were a lot of versions where I was putting out a lot of numbers there. 99.99 percentile, 151 in JE, KVP by NTSC. You do have to understand that the passage should be readable. It should surmount to something which convinces the other through written words that you are a serious candidate. And then finally, going in for the kill, I see the FMS MBA not merely as education, but as the launch pad to transform potential into purpose and passion into performance. A bit of a fluff, but given how everything else was structured, this is something that you can go for. So if we go towards the next slide, and if you look at the initial draft and final draft, you will see, just take 2 minutes to understand these two, just skim through these, and you will see how the final version is so much better. And it was made by research, by talking to people who were part of that college, people who actually had experience in teaching others, talking to peers in consulting, talking to peers in other industries, understanding where my profiles fit, my profile fits the best. So a lot of research went there, and it really helped. A lot of these efforts you will be able to reuse in your actual interview prep as well. So we will show you that how to reuse all this effort in that critical phase. So I think that is it for FMS part.